We should do a swap. That's what we'll do next.
That would be amazing.
For those of you who don't know, that means swap each other's podcasts, not swap.
Oh my God.
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't want to throw that out there. And if that is being thrown out there, we haven't had a full discussion about the rules and regulations.
People have made up their mind now.
This is the audio bite that you're going to put out.
1,000%.
This is what we're going to put out there. We're going to get those listens up.
You're listening to the Laughing Couple podcast with your hosts, Brittany and Ryan Ostafy. Join them weekly as they discuss topics such as relationships, kids, sex, parenting, all unfiltered and all with a healthy dose of laughter. Please welcome your hosts, Brittany and Ryan Ostafy.
I wonder if people can guess who you are just by your voice. But now that I say that, you're obviously going to be in the title of this show. So that was such a stupid thing to say.
I'm one of those. I have such a hard time hearing my own voice, though. Do you have
Same.
that? Like, is that what? Because we
1,000%.
hear ourselves one way, and then when we hear it externally, it freaks me right out. So I have my kids are not allowed to have their phones on full volume if they watch my stories because I'm like, no, I'm so annoying. I literally can't. I cannot.
I cannot relate to this more. Ryan has his volume on like 25 and he's beside me on the couch listening to me. I'm like, can you not?
I'm just trying to be supportive.
Quietly supportive.
I know how the algorithm works. I don't want to swipe away from your stories. I don't want to ruin your numbers. So when I accidentally stumble on your stories, I see them all the way through. Even if there's like 47 stories for the day. I may put it beside me and watch something else, but I won't flip.
No, you're not actually watching me. Okay, hold on. So we have Sarah Landry, the Birds Papaya, in case anyone was like, I actually don't know and I didn't look at the show notes.
Hi.
How are you?
I love that you watch the stories, though. I have to loop back to that because every once in a while I see Shane watches mine. He doesn't really go on Instagram, but when he does, I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, I feel so invaded. I'm just like... I'm so uncomfortable.
I know.
We're intimate in every way, but please don't look at my public information, which I tell thousands of people every single day.
Yeah, like it's different.
That's for strangers. This is for you.
Right. My dad does that, but he doesn't tell me he watches my stories, and then I see him and he'll like allude to something that I said in stories, and then he'll just like wait for me to like acknowledge the fact that I knew he was creeping on my stories, and I'm like,
I think I just get into a zone where I'm like, I'm just chatting with my girls, I'm just chatting with friends, and then I'm like, right, Uncle Pete is also here. Pete also is here. Hi, Uncle Pete, if you ever listen to this. Sometimes they listen to my podcast. They listen to one episode and my aunt's like, we had to skip over a little couple parts there. And I was like, no.
Oh my God, that's so awkward. But it's part of being a podcaster. That's part of what we wanted to talk to you about today. But I feel like maybe that's just something that we can go into right now. So
shall we go for it?
We always, Celine. So you've been podcasting for quite some time. You are like a professional. So you are.
Well,
sorry. That's legit. So like, you're right. That's not a good word. You are a professional.
But I don't feel it. I always feel on the outside. I think people need to know that because I think I had such bad imposter syndrome about ever having a podcast because it felt like everybody had a podcast. And so I kept delaying, even pushing out episodes. And now I'm like 4 years in and I still feel like I'm somehow like faking my way through this thing. And I'm like, no, you've been doing it for 4 years. It's legit. It's real. But it's a really weird mental game. But I also kind of love it. I love that even though you can like see the charts, you can see the numbers, you can see the growth, like people will even be like, oh, I listened to your podcast. It's still just this weird thing where in my head, I'm living in a different world from that. And I think that's been overall beneficial, but it is a very bizarre world when you just, the legitimacies of it. And I guess like you guys look like you have like such a beautiful setup and I'll see all these people and they've got video equipment. They're doing so well at everything. And I'm like, I'm still just scrappy in this little room that I podcast in. And I just have to validate myself that it's a real podcast and we're doing the dang thing.
We can totally relate. We just had our 3 years.
This is our basement, by the way. So
oh my God.
Thank you for saying it's such a nice setup. We have 2 microphones and a basement and 2 chairs that don't match.
Before we honestly, we podcasted upstairs in
spare
the spare bedroom and it was like, it was not a nice setup in the back. Like your setup looks nice. Like it actually is nice.
It's just
there.
my office, to be honest, but a lot of times it ends up being like the dumping zone because it has a door to it and it's mine. So when I get stressed out or people are coming over, it's where I dump everything.
Yeah.
And then I'll climb over it for like 4 months. And every podcast I'll be like, oh, so excuse the background. We're just going through things right now. I'm just moving things around. No, it's literally always like this. This is artwork that has been here for 6 months that I keep saying I'm going to put up on the walls. It's chaos. It's who I am. I'm really owning it. I am always impressed when people seem to have it together. And then I realize that almost none of us do.
I know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to like having these high expectations for yourself when you look at everyone else's and they're shooting their podcasts in like 5 different cameras, all 4K.
It's amazing.
We got this like nice little Zoom set up, and thank goodness we've got Jake, because Jake makes this look like it's much bigger than it actually is in terms of visibility or whatever visuals. But it's funny to me, like the worst thing that happened to all of us is COVID, and the best thing that happened to this podcast is COVID, because it made it happen, but B, people had this generosity in terms of like, well, they know you can't be face to face with people, so Zoom is now okay.
It is
podcasting in your basement is okay. So for us, it was like the most cost-effective way to ever do a podcast is in the middle of a pandemic, because you don't have to have a studio. You don't have to have a set. Your expectations are next to nothing. People are just happy that you're talking to somebody. And here we are, and we've been doing it. And I don't know if we'll ever change it, because it's everyone's accessible.
The pandemic was a great equalizer. We no longer, there was nobody who had there was obviously advantages like with technology and stuff where people had certain equipment or like could quickly spend thousands of dollars to create a setup. But for most of us, we're like, this is very scrappy now, and everybody's scrappy now. Exactly. Your favorite podcast now had this tin can phone call sort of sound to them that we'd only ever heard before, when it was like a reporter calling somebody's sister of somebody who got murdered, and you're like listening to that sort. You know what I mean? Like they're always like investigators were like, oh, I only listen to crime podcasts. I should probably note that. But that's the only time you ever heard that like sort of audio happen on a podcast. So the pandemic was a really great way for it sort of to equalize and give a lot of podcasts a chance, I think, too. And then now we're coming into the space where it feels like, okay, if you have a podcast, you also have to have video, and you also have to have this. And it's like, everything it's intense.
I know. I have 2 questions. One is, have you ever heard of the podcast called Sweet Bobby?
No. Is it a crime podcast?
I will send you the stuff later. It is the most messed up. It's like an episode. I think it's only like 6 episodes, but it's basically about a catfish story, and it's the most insane story I've ever heard in my whole life.
Oh my gosh,
I will send you the info later.
Okay.
And for everybody else listening, like look up the podcast called Sweet Bobby.
Sweet Bobby.
I'm not a podcast listener at all.
Yeah.
And this podcast sounds like something I would have listened to, but I'll tell you why I won't. One evening, we got away from our children and had a date day. It was nice. It was lovely. And I didn't get one single word in during our date because I heard every millisecond of all 6 episodes. I guarantee you, I could tell you.
Good.
I can tell you that entire podcast, the 6 episodes, verbatim.
But
I haven't listened to 1 ounce of it.
Didn't it sound amazing?
Honestly, Brittany should have a podcast about that podcast.
Shut up. You have to listen to it.
This is the thing. I listen to crime podcasts because for whatever reason, this sort of terrifies me about myself, but I find them very relaxing. I spent like the first, legitimately from the age of 5 till about 25, I had night terrors. So legitimate night terrors. I was constantly in fear of something bad happening to me, that I was I couldn't even sleep in a house alone. My parents had to have alarm systems. I slept with a personal alarm. I slept with a butcher knife underneath my pillow. I was not okay for so long. I also
slept with a knife under my pillow.
I was just constantly afraid. So crime podcasts somehow like brought all of those fears to the forefront, and then made me realize like a lot of these circumstances are either entirely random or somebody that you know. And so I'm like, make good choices of who you know. And if it happens, it happens. Like you have to be aware, but the fear, living in fear really just made my life so small and so terrifying all the time that now when I'm driving, I listen to I either listen to Crime Junkies or right now they've actually like skinned episodes of, that sounds bad to say skinned about a crime thing, but Dateline, like Dateline the show, they've taken the audio now and they've made it episodes of podcasts. It is so good. And you hear that like booming voice and it's like, oh, it's so mysterious and well done, well produced. So I find them very calming. I struggle with highway anxiety. So it just puts me in a different space and it makes me face this like fear I had for over 20 years. And I don't have night terrors anymore.
The idea that validating that there are really bad people out there is what you needed to no longer fear the fact that there are really bad people out there.
I know so much. I know that we on average pass 35 murderers in our lifetime.
Stop.
35 each of us.
What do you
will pass
mean?
35
like driving?
murderers. Like in the streets, like we've crossed paths with 35 murderers. You can Google the stat. So
How
there's
does
like
somebody
this weird,
come up with that? Like, how do you
know.
find
I
that?
guess
It's
I guess they've done it by like how many people exist and then just like the cross check with how many murders there have been and like those. It's just a weird little stat, but even one, the reality is we've like crossed paths with a murderer. It doesn't mean they're a serial killer or anything like that, but I mean, crime has always, I think women especially, because if you look at true crime, it's usually women that listen to it. I'd love to know the psychology behind why we find it interesting, fascinating. Are we preparing ourselves? Is it our anxiety speaking? I think we already create the scenarios that are so terrifying anyways that sometimes facing them feels, to me, relaxing. And for other people, it makes them so scared that these things could happen at all. But I've already run every horrible scenario that could possibly happen.
Every time Brittany goes out for dinner with her friends or goes out for drinks with her friends, I stay up until she's home. And I'm not saying I don't stay up because I'm like, I need to know when you're home. I stay up because I need to know that you're home.
Yeah. It makes the way our parents were make so much more sense. Eh? Like I was always like, can you just like, why do I have to have a curfew? Because they wanted to go to bed is why we had a curfew. Now I realize. Now I know.
Sure.
I have my kids, like I have the little, like I can see where they are and stuff. And there's been a couple times where my son's just like dropped the ball, like genuinely like playing basketball and he's going and he's out somewhere and is literally playing a sport and not on his phone. Yeah. And it sucks because now we have this like monitoring system. I want my kid to be outside and enjoy his life. And at the same time, I'm terrified for that. So giving them the freedom in this sort of world is, it's a new reality. And I'm a catastrophic thinker, even beyond the whole 20 years of night terrors. My son at one point, the school called and was like, hey, he never arrived. And it was maybe 2 minutes. It was maybe 2 minutes, but I pulled over the car to the side of the road and I was all the way down to, oh my God, this sounds horrible, but this is the reality of catastrophic thinking.
No,
I was like, how am I possibly going to speak at his funeral? Like I went all the way down to, I'm never going to see him again. This is what's going to happen. I've had like really bad, I think when you have children, you start to do that where you start to like envision scenarios that things could happen. With Bowden, I've had them more than any of the kids. And because I'm like a little woo-woo, I'm like, was that a sign? So then he goes missing. Literally it was an attendance error, but they called us and was like, he's not here. My ex-husband was like, I dropped him off. And we had this 2 minutes of standstill of our son is missing. And in those 2 minutes, my brain went all the way down to the worst case scenario. But what I've learned about catastrophic thinking is our brains trying to prepare for the worst. It's our brains trying to be like, okay, we are practicing. We're practicing for what is potentially about to come. I don't know how we got all the way here, but that's like a reality.
I love it.
We did. I think a lot of people relate though. And I feel so bad when I talk about it. Like my son was missing. I already was planning his funeral, but like that's where my brain went. That's what happened. When I can't get a hold of them or when I'm waiting up for them to get home, I go to the worst before I think of the best. And
go ahead.
It's huge.
Can I just tell you, yesterday whatever day, on Saturday, I was coming home from Sky Zone with our daughter and Ryan and Cooper were home and I had called you twice. Okay. And I had texted you 3 times. Nothing. On the way home, I created this I'm going to say this is super fucked up of me to do, but I did. My brain was like, okay, somebody got in the house. They've killed you. And
Clearly.
like the next time I call, it's going to be like, this is a picture of your daughter. If you don't come right now, like she's ours. Like that is where my brain went.
Yeah, this is what I do.
Why am I thinking about this? Like it was so weird. But then I'm like, okay. And so then I started to prepare. Like, what would I do if they're probably going to know and they have a tracer on my phone, so I can't go to the cops? Maybe I'll like flag down. It's so weird. I'm like, this is my brain. I need to just chill out a little bit so I can completely relate to that.
Well, if I may interject for a moment, the two of you have a very large platform which you speak from on a consistent basis, and both of your husbands participate but are not active users in either of those.
Yeah.
You would have a reality and a thought that crosses your mind that wouldn't cross our minds regardless, because you put yourselves out there, because people know who you are, and for the most part generally have an idea of where-ish you are in this world.
For sure.
And so, there's a significant fear in that, because there are people who know a lot about your lives.
Yeah, that's actually a good leeway. So I want to know, like, what are your thoughts on this? Because you have such an interesting dynamic. So you have older children, and now you have Lemmy. So I find like when I've actually instilled, I think I've given Riley some trauma, but like strangers, like when we're out, I've literally said like, you're going to be locked up in a basement, chained to the wall. Like I've been no joke. So how do you kind of navigate this space with your kids? Because it is dangerous. People can be a little crazy. And when I'm out and people address my kids before they even speak to me, it drives me nuts, because my kids are like, whoa, like, who are you type thing. Like it freaks
Riley
me out.
is. Cooper's like, hey.
Cooper's like, do you have puppies or candy?
Take a look at my truck.
I'll come with you. So do you feel like you've had to have these conversations with your kids, or are they kind of just like, yes, I know? And like, how are you navigating it with Lemmy?
Yeah, so I definitely have a lot of thoughts on this. And there has been times where I've maybe been like, oh, because we're known, then that makes us higher risk. But statistically, that's not actually true. It's much more random, or it's people you know. So it's not usually, like, if you look it up statistically, like it is sort of like an amplified conversation of like risk, because it's like, well, like for instance, someone was like, would you ever do a house tour, or would you not want to do that because then someone would case your joint? And I'm like, I wouldn't even think about that. Like that's not even in my realm of thinking. Again, I just have of the belief that if somebody wanted to figure out something about you, they would, right? And so sure, maybe there's like more people that have that awareness or whatever, but when it comes to the kids, like they were a little bit older before anybody like really would come up to us or anything, but they have grown up in it. And I think I've had the same conversations with them that I would have. I'm actually glad it's pushed me to have bigger conversations about just like online safety. They seem a little bit more, not paranoid, but they seem like they haven't fallen for any weird messages. Like they're leery of everybody, which I think is somewhat good, as opposed to just thinking that everything is safe and amazing and that we're just not going to ever talk about anything and there's not a possibility of anything going wrong. If somebody is a parent and they're not on the internet or not on social media, I still think you need to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
I still think you need to have this awareness of like, somebody could see you at the park, somebody could see you at the mall, somebody could see you, like those random things are not usually, you know, I saw something on social media and I followed it to these steps, but I'm also not an expert in this. And I think with the kids being older, and now Lemmy, she was so fun to share as like a baby, but now as she's getting older, I am very much having that like decision making for myself of like, do I pull her off? Do I like just keep her? Like, if you notice, I used to have her in my posts all the time, and now I'm suddenly I'm at this time, and I'll be honest, where I like don't really know the right answer. I don't really know what the right thing is to do, and everyone has like differentiating opinions, and it's hard to sort of have all of the facts, all of the opinions, and somehow find yours in that, and make sure that you're doing a good job of it. And I'll be the first to admit, I don't know that I've had a lot of consideration for the longevity of the internet and things like that. I've had to really sit with it a little bit more, and I've been just taking my time with the decision, if I'm honest with you. And I've seen a lot of people sort of change their hearts and minds about all of these things, but my kids are now all of age to be on social media. So we've had a lot of conversations about social media. I allowed them to be observers of it for some time before they were ever allowed to actually have accounts and be on it. They were allowed to have accounts to watched. For instance, like my 2 older girls were able to be on social media a lot sooner than my son. So my son was like, this doesn't feel fair. I never get to watch your stories. I never get to see what Lemmy's doing. Aww. And so I was like, okay, you're allowed to have an account for observing only. And so he had an observing only account that I still had all access to. Like it's technically my account, but so that he could have that like interaction. So now he's 13. And I think this is where the conversation is like, okay, social media can be really damaging for kids, but also the reality is that social media is here. And so I'm trying to figure out the best I can through my own experiences, the facts that are out there, understanding all of this and somehow trying to translate it into your children while also being on a public platform where everyone is like, has differentiating opinions about it. It is so tough. And I'm a bit of a people pleaser. So the second somebody will say something, I'll like, my gut reaction is like, no, I'm horrible. I've done something really, really wrong. And the reality is we're all just, this is very new. We're the guinea pig generation. Nobody before us, like, I don't know. It's just a very, very different time. And I think it's important that we're having conversations and we're having conversations about what's safe on the internet and what's not and how to approach strangers in public and not. But these are age-old conversations that are in a new age of technology, and it just adds a layer. And it's really weird. I mean, especially over the pandemic, my kids, most of their friends became online friends. They didn't have real life friends anymore. They had online friends.
True.
And suddenly it was like that, oh my God, this is like everything against what we've taught our kids forever to do. Don't like participate. I remember being a teenager and it's like being on chat rooms was the worst possible thing you could do.
Yes.
And now it's like, that's all they had for 3 years. And so we had to change. We had to evolve to be like, how do you find safety within chat rooms? How do you come to tell us when something is going wrong? And really being aware that like we might get this wrong along the way. We might get it right. And it's really a new thing to navigate.
Right.
It's very fascinating because you you look historically, fame as a benchmark. Fame prior to social media was you were on TV and you were an A-list celebrity, B-list celebrity, D-list celebrity. And then all of a sudden this thing came up, which was a negative connotation at the beginning. It was like, oh, you're Insta famous, right? And everyone used that term to like throw shit at people who were known on Instagram. But now you start looking at it and like, if you are an A-list celebrity and you're not on a platform showing your life, nobody knows who you are anymore. So like Instagram, I would say Instagram probably being the number one for connecting a community together. If you don't have an Instagram account and people aren't on there, then nobody knows who you are. So this Insta famous is fame now. You go anywhere you go, I'm imagining people know who you are. Oh, that's Sarah. Oh, that's Sarah. Oh, that's even if it's like, oh, that's Sarah the papaya, right? Like,
yeah. Oh, all the time.
it's always there. And so it's so fascinating to me that you don't have to have this blockbuster of a career to be well known and documented. But on the flip side of it is, in order to have access to that, you have to give access. And so it's this like weird little entanglement that we find ourselves in. And I just,
you remember
it's
being
a
a kid and
time.
like going to a fan, like having to write into a fan club, or like you had to pay $25 a month to be a part of anything to get a letter. We have access to the people we love and support now. Right. And not only that, but we have the abilities to actually build real life communities in online spaces. I started this living 6 hours away from home and being so lonely and just wanting to find community. And so it's interesting. People always apologize to me when they see me in public and they're like, oh my God, hi, I follow you. And they're like, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. And I'm like, no, I literally talk in my phone all day to faceless people. And when somebody comes up to me and is like, I'm one of those faces, that makes it real for me.
Yeah.
That makes it meaningful for me. That reminds me of what it was like when I was in a time where I was watching everybody else and just, you know, getting through those long nights of nursing a baby or whatever those things were. I like building community. Even like Britt, when you and I met, it was like we'd known each other forever.
I know,
so it was like
so bizarre.
Going from one, like the only thing was like, oh, you're taller in person than I expected. And like, other than that, I was like, no, I've known you forever. Like, how would I know your humor. I adore you. I know your family. I've like watched you guys go through things. That's real. That's a very real thing. And so I actually am somebody who has also watched I have a kid who doesn't have the same interests as a lot of kids at school. And she found community online, and she found herself and her confidence and the ability to be herself by finding other people in these online spaces. When I went through divorce, didn't know a single person going through divorce, but I found people online that were. And when I see those people in real life, it's like such a meaningful moment for me. And so I really always try to remember that, like, fame is entirely different. It is very, very different, but it's also equal opportunity that we've never seen before. Everybody has a phone. Everybody has the ability to pick it up and start creating. Yes, some people have a greater advantage due to many sorts of privileges along the way. But for a lot of people, even just the joy of being able to share their story, even for one or two people, is a very meaningful thing that we didn't always have when we were kids.
When you put out content, and I'm sure you've experienced this so much, and something goes viral, or it is like really, really relatable to people, anytime a video or a post does that, it's, for me at least, it's twofold, because it's awesome, because most of the time the comments are amazing, but in those viral videos is where a lot of mean thoughts are as well. So I just told Raya, I said, I have had to put my phone down because of TikTok, and TikTok is like ruthless. And
relentless.
It's so bad. And I'm like, this sucks for me, because like you, I really started this because I felt I needed a community to connect to. And when a video does that, I can no longer find myself in the comments to respond to the really lovely ones, because the negative ones put you in such a messed up headspace. And like, how do you personally, because everybody has their own kind of mechanisms to deal and cope with that, but how do you find yourself? If like, do you just take a full stop? Do you vent to Shane? Is there friends? Because it's a hard thing to navigate.
Yeah, and there's a lot of shame that comes with it, because it feels like all eyes are seeing this and must believe it. And let's be real, people will hate follow you, or they'll randomly see it, and they'll also collectively have conversations with each other about why you're the worst thing in the world,
on
or why
your
you're
page.
this, that, and the other, on your own page. And so it's a very interesting dynamic where you're like, I want to be open, honest, and like create these spaces. And also, how do I keep doing that when you come under attack for things? I actually am going through it right now, but there was a time even on TikTok, I posted a TikTok about like marrying your coworker. And all of a sudden these like comments came up about how Shane and I had actually had some affair, that we had an affair, and that we come together. Keep in mind, I met him after my divorce. He was dating somebody, and then they broke up. And sometime later down the road, we became a couple. But the whole conversation was, she started working there, and then 2 marriages were dissolved, and no, he wasn't married. And I was like, where did this even come from? Where is it stemming from? And why are so many people a part of it? And like, you kind of have to and it's awful, because then you're like, did we do something wrong? Should we never? Like, it puts you in a space where you're like, you almost feel gaslit about your own story and your own experiences and your own truth. And a lot of times I close up, I turtle up so hard, and Shane will usually see it, and he'll be like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And then, I basically will be like, people are saying this, and it's just awful, because I know the truth, but it's so hard when people don't want to hear the truth. They don't care about what it is that you have to say. They've decided, they've made a decision about you, and that's that. And it's not just the viral stuff. It's like the people who are actually looking for that gotcha moment. I recently did a photo shoot that was part of this is the first time I'm talking about this. This is the thing that's like in real time. So if I cry, I'm sorry. But I went down to LA and I did a photo shoot for the body edition of Women's Health. And so I always expected that people were going to have shit things to say about like how I'm not healthy enough to be in the magazine, or whatever they want to allude to without knowing any facts whatsoever. But the reality was that these photos, I was styled differently than I normally would. It was somebody else taking the pictures, and I had food poisoning that week. And so I was probably a little puffier in the face. It all doesn't really matter. I'm happy with the photos. It does look different than like I normally look, but people saw these photos and decided that for every other time I've ever been on social media was a lie, because that looked too different from how I normally show up online. That every single time they've ever seen a video of me must have been filtered to look like something else, when I have struggled with that in the past. I've struggled with over filtering myself and really having to like want to be like, you know what, I want to be better. I want to not do that. I'm trying to like work in this space and share my journey, but also like it's hard. It's hard, especially as a woman, when like it's never enough. It's never good enough. I'm sitting here in front of you right now with like no makeup on, but this shoot, they ended up having to shut the comments off because people just started piggybacking on it to the point that I was just vibrating and my whole body was in pain. I was sick to my stomach and I was like, it doesn't matter what I say. They've decided that I've lied. They've decided, and people are like, oh, you're being awfully quiet, you fake as fuck bitch. And I was like, what do you want me to say?
Right.
It's somebody else's creative and I do different types of makeup on a day to day. I don't know what to say. There's nothing I can say in this situation. And all you have is your truth.
Yeah.
And all you have is who you are. And when at the end of my life, when I stand and I look at the history of it all, I hope to stand on the right side of it, that I never do that to another woman or I never do that to another person online. And I remember now so deeply when I see people going through drama and controversy and the dopamine hits that we enjoy when two TikTokers are fighting and we like, wait, what happened? Let's get to the roots of it. I no longer want to be a part of any of that because I don't know the truth. And I know now how hard it is to go through that. And even on a really fluffy side, when Shane got a vasectomy and I made him a cake, it was so viral of men being so angry at me for allowing my husband to get, or putting my husband in position to get a vasectomy, that they would have done anything to take me down. That was just comical. But when it comes for your character, it's different and it's so hard. And I feel like we're not talking about it because to talk about it is to, complain about this world. And that's not what it's about at all. But I don't think anymore that this is the type of career, if it stays on the track it is, I don't know that I can do even the good stuff very long. I'll be very honest about that. I don't know how people do this. I've been doing it for 15 years. It's never been like it has been the last 3 years. It's never been this bad.
You know, I used to say to Brittany in the early stages, you always get you put yourself out there. I hate that bullshit because the truth of the matter is you don't put yourself out there to get ridiculed. You put yourself out there to build a community, to build a support system, to provide content for someone to help their day. Or when you have a platform like this, you have the opportunity to bring in professionals and have conversations that people aren't having and give them access to things that they don't have. It's not coming on here to get shit on. But I used to say to Brittany, and we have this saying, and I'll keep the actual saying to ourselves, but if it's not true, it shouldn't offend you. And we only get offended by things that we somewhat think are true. That's not true anymore.
No.
Yeah.
That's not true anymore. The problem is, and you nailed it when you said, when you don't comment back, people assume it's real. The problem that we have in today's society is I could say something, I can create absolute chaos and not be responsible for it. If the truth comes out and it's like, whoa, wait a second, that's not true. That didn't happen. Sarah didn't do the X, Y, and Z that you said. What's the ramifications for the person who created that chaos? There's zero. There's no accountability. There's no responsibility. There's not even an apology that comes with that. And then all of a sudden there's this trail of space because people don't get the full closure that they need. You talk about Dateline. Why don't I watch Dateline? Because at the end of the Dateline, I don't know the answers.
Oh, you just don't watch the unsolved ones. I can't listen to the
I don't
watch unsolved things.
I can't. And so when it comes to drama, there is no closure for people. So that loop stays open. And when that loop stays open, that doubt stays in. And then your reputation's tarnished because some Yahoo who, let's be honest with you, doesn't like their lives enough to care about what's going on in theirs and has to beat yours. They're not responsible for it. There's no accountability for it. And it's total garbage.
It's changing. It's changing. There are creators who are starting to work with everything on the internet is not actually as private as they think, because there are creators now who have openly used digital investigators, and they have gone and taken down. They've filed defamation suits. They've let the workplaces of these people know. It is. I don't think the track of what it's currently going on is going to last. Now on Instagram, it's a little bit safer because you can block somebody and they're not able to create a new account to like do things like that. TikTok doesn't have that. But the reality is, like, I do think that there is going to have to be some sort of an answer to this, because you're right. People can say whatever they want. They can make outlandish claims. I just saw recently somebody, it was like a celebrity, and I don't know the real story. Regardless, but he was like, you're going to push me to a point of no return. And we all know what that means. we all like, and it was just a very stark reality of this isn't nothing. Like, this isn't just fluff comments and like, yes, you put yourself out to it. I am, every single time I see creators and I ask them how they're doing, the answer is so muddy now because I don't know anybody who's doing great. I don't know anybody who's like managing this really well and has got it fully figured out because, and this is somebody in a very privileged position. I have somebody who is, trans. I have another friend who is non-binary, and I did a collab post with them once. And when I saw the kind of comments that they have to deal with on a daily basis, I was like, this isn't okay. Like, there isn't equal opportunity. We just talked about equal opportunity, but the reality is there also isn't, because if anybody actually wants to be truthful online or be who they are, a lot of spaces just won't even let them without mass amounts of bullying and targeting towards them, their character.
It's dangerous.
It's a terrifying, it's a terrifying time. And it's unfortunate because, on the pandemic, almost all of us spent all of our days on the phone, just being entertained by, I was so grateful for creators during that time because I was like, we needed to laugh. We needed to see things that made us feel human. We needed to feel connected. And I think we also forget that typical creator careers are not, we haven't even seen the longevity of them, right? So yeah, people might make a lot of money for a significant amount of time and they have to spread that out like a 30, 40 year career would be. So there's a lot of work involved. Your actual profit is on the line, and the line between person and brand is so gray now that when somebody comes to attack you, the person, you're also attacking the livelihood of your team, your staff, the people that support you, the brands that invested in you. It's so much bigger, but they just don't care, and it's unfortunate. I just do think I have hope. I have so much hope for humanity. I have so much hope for people that I do think that there is going to be a time that there is responsibility and there is accountability held for that side of things too, and that it does become somewhat a little bit more. I don't even know what the word is. I don't even think the word is safe, but just that we're able to create in a way that maybe has some more boundaries.
Yeah.
But
and like,
I
don't feel like I feel like before, and people still do this. Like, I think one of my most annoying pet peeves about when somebody messages me and they're like, just ignore the trolls, just ignore them. And I'm like, Rebecca, I do. I ignore 99% of the people who are mean to me. Like, I'm just like, I'm not going to give this the space. And I think like ignoring somebody who has zero posts, zero, like that's a troll who's just trying to get the best of you. And I've learned that over the past couple of years. Like, I don't even engage in that, but I think it's okay. And I do think it's important every once in a while to address publicly, like, this is not okay. And for me to say this isn't okay isn't giving them power. I'm just letting everybody know, like, you can't do this. And Ryan made a comment about, well, you put yourself out there. That doesn't give an excuse, right? Like, somebody said to me the other day, it was so awesome because I had said something on my platform about mental health and it was like my own journey, and someone didn't like it. They were triggered. And so I just said, then unfollow me, and then I blocked them. Yeah. And then this person continued. Yeah. This person then found me on all of my other socials and started bullying me. And someone said to me, it would be like if I had a small business, a store, and somebody came in and they were super rude to me and challenged my own mental health in my own store, I would ask them to leave, like, goodbye.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. This is my space. This is my boundary. I'm telling you, you're not allowed to be here. And that's okay. Like, I'm not giving them power.
Yeah. The other thing is like, and especially for the two of you, more so than me, you have to be careful on how you respond, because cancel culture is true. It's like instant. And you say the wrong thing to the wrong person who has a platform to spread it, and then you become that person. And going back to what you were saying before, you have an entire catalog history of who you are. And they can go back throughout time and find out this is how you react to all of these things. They'll ignore 14 years of background you and zero in on 5 seconds of you when you could have had a bad day, when you could have had a bad minute.
You could have had food poisoning.
You could have had food. Like, there's so many, like you talked about earlier, having imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I read something the other day. It's like, imposter syndrome's only true if you haven't proven yourself to be able to succeed in a category. So when you have evidence to support success, imposter syndrome's not imposter syndrome, it's something else. Oh, wow. And so when you look at that and you flip it on the other side, it's like, I've proven myself X, Y, Z amount of times. You're going to zero in on this 1 millisecond and this is who I am and this is the narrative moving forward. How is that even remotely fair? And then to go back, and as we said before, if that narrative isn't even true, it's like you're ruining people's careers, their livelihoods. Yeah. This is how they put food on their table. It's like me showing up to your work and saying, you said X, Y, and Z to your boss, having your boss fire you. And I was lying the entire time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people forget that this platform is people's livelihoods. It is their jobs. It is their careers. It is their opportunities. And they just throw out these things like it doesn't mean anything. It's so impactful in people's lives.
Yeah, it is. And I honestly think that, I mean, there's twofold of it. Like, I actually leave up I think almost every. So I used to be like a totally different creator. I used to like be full of diet culture and saying all the wrong things. And I've left those up for a reason, because I want people to see that people can change. They can change their mind. They can grow and evolve. There's been times where a creator actually called me out on an issue, and we actually hopped on a podcast to have a very real conversation. I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy to fail and fail out loud and fail forward. But it's the sticky part of like when people just decide what's the truth for you, and they get enough other people that you just irked or they don't like you, and that's just the reality. And they piggyback on that and create conversations and communities amongst each other to be able to character attack you in a way that is really, really difficult. And honestly, it's isolating and it's embarrassing, and they corner you. They know what they've done. They know that they know that you don't want to create more eyes on that, because even if it's not true, it doesn't matter. Once it's like out there, it's like a seed. Do you ever watch that, like How I Met Your Mother, and they all like talk about the icks about each other? And then once they say the icks out loud, everybody sees them. That's how I sort of feel. So like, I do have a little bit of like a bless and block mentality, or like having honest conversations with people on the off chance that maybe we can like come to a common ground. But I listened to a podcast years ago by JVN, and it was with a brain psychologist that talked about what happens to us when we receive negative comments and what happens when we reply. And the reality is, it's brain damage. Brain damage when we receive these comments, and brain damage for both of us when you reply. And I will never forget that. So when I get into that, like, am I wrong for blocking this person? Am I creating a bubble environment of people in this home, in this online space and home that I have? The reality is, I'm actually also protecting them from the brain damage that can be caused if we get into it together out loud. And so I very lovingly and with a lot of hope think, and you know, there's a creator online that I just genuinely rubs me the wrong way. I've never been able to make sense of it. Cannot make sense of it. So many people love this person. That is not her problem. That's a me problem. And you know what I did? I quietly unfollowed, or I mute, or I remove myself from the situation. Not everybody has that control. I will be honest. There has been so many times that I've like sat with my friends and been like, did you see what's going on with this person? Like, and now, like, the further I go down it, I'm like, you know what? That was wrong for me to do. That was wrong for me to, even outside of social media, engage in conversations about people that I just don't know the facts and I don't know them. And that if I'm bothered by something that they're doing and it's not, you know, hurting other people, it's a me problem. And I think the more that we evolve as humans, we have to start reflecting on, I'm maybe unhappy, or there's something that's bothering me, but that doesn't mean that this creator should be punished because of how I'm feeling or because of the experience that I'm having. It's my responsibility to unfollow. It's my responsibility to not create damage for both of us. But that takes a level of emotional maturity that I think is,
which I don't think a lot of people have.
It's not for everyone.
I love the fact that you're saying these things, and I wish wholeheartedly that everybody who has shit to throw at you would listen to this podcast. But the truth of the matter is, the people who throw shit at you aren't looking to validate that they're wrong.
Oh, of course
they're looking to validate that they're right. So they won't listen to this podcast. They won't get this perspective of you. And I'm sure you've had this conversation on multiple platforms. It's unfortunate because they're seeking information to validate their perspective, and this isn't the platform to get it on.
So they don't want to learn.
So true.
We thank you immensely for having this conversation with us, throwing it out to our community and strengthening your community as a result. There are more people cheering for you that are not cheering for you. And these are the conversations, and these are the reasons why people love you the way that they do, is because you are real.
Authentic.
You are authentic. You're okay with making mistakes. Yeah, we love you. And thank you very much for having this conversation. This is not where I thought the podcast was going to go.
I love that it went this way.
From crime junkies to...
it went everywhere.
Love it. I love it. I love it.
I think it's sometimes the conversations that you end up needing to have, right? Like, if I'm honest, like, this has been a wild last week, and I felt so isolated in the experience. I think just even being able to talk about it out loud and be like, I don't know what the answers are for all of this, but I'm thankful to be talking about it and to be in a space that feels safe and to have that opportunity. And I think that this is not a very funny episode. I'm very sorry to everyone that they didn't get the laughing version of me. I am quite hilarious, but
we'll
I usually get...
Yeah, 1,000%.
I think we're trying to get Shane and I both on, and we'll have we should do a swap. That's what we'll do next.
That would be amazing.
For those of you who don't know, that means swap each other's podcasts, not swap.
Oh my God.
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't want to throw that out there. And if that is being thrown out there, we haven't had a full discussion about the rules and regulations.
People have made up their mind now.
This is the audio bite that you're going to put out.
1,000%.
This is what we're going to put out there. We're going to get those listens up. Yeah, that's what's happening.
Did
Mom
you
Talk
hear
2.0.
that the Birds Papaya and Bostophy are doing the swap?
Stop.
Yeah, they did it. Yeah, it's already happened.
It.
Confirmed here.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much.
Talk soon.
Truly appreciate you.
Bye.
Take care.
There goes a sight from my soul.